Welcome back to Piers Morgan Uncensored. Professor Kathleen Stock is due to speak at Oxford University's 200-year-old debating society next month, but she's faced a furious backlash from students who say her supposedly transphobic views mean she shouldn't be given a platform. This is the same academic who had to quit her job as a lecturer at the University of Sussex after being targeted by activists for her views on gender identity. Oxford University's Vice-Chancellor has defended Stock's appearance as a matter of free speech, but the university is braced for up to 1,000 protesters and counter-protesters to take action when she appears at the end of the month. The student union is understood to have cut ties with the debating society. So there's a huge rift now at the heart of Oxford University, and it all begs the question, how exactly are you supposed to have a debating society if you don't actually allow proper debate with people whose opinions you don't like? Well, joining me now is podcast host and comedian Konstantin Kisin, Professor of Sociology at Oxford University, Dr. Michael Briggs, and Oxford student and trans rights activist Riz Possnett. Well, welcome to all of you. Riz, you're over there in Oxford. Let me start with you. You've been on the show before. I don't get this. The whole point of going to university is you're supposed to have open minds, hear views you may not like, challenge them, put your own views forward, evolve, learn. What's all this censorship about?
Yeah, I mean, effectively, this is students exercising their own free speech, right? Like, she has been platformed by this institution. Students have consistently said, we don't think she should speak here, we don't want her here, because her views are part of a broader hate campaign and moral panic that's really damaging the lives of trans people. So students have voted that they don't want her here in their college institutions, in the student union, and now the university have overruled that vote. I also want to clarify something here. The SU, the student union, voted to cut ties with the debating society, the Oxford Union, not over this, but over an extensive history of them bullying, harassing, and just having like general bigotry, racism within their institution. So it's not over this nuanced issue. It's about the history of the.
But on the
Oxford
specific
Union.
point about Kathleen Stock, you tweeted this. You've got some effing nerve, Kathleen. You've brought your hatred into our community, and now you use the threats we receive because of your actions to try to garner more sympathy for your victim narrative. Oxford doesn't want your bigotry here, and will make it known. Now, I've studied the Kathleen Stock saga. I actually come from Sussex, so had a vested interest in my county and this university. What is it about her that is so hateful? What has she said or done that is actually so wicked?
Yeah, Kathleen has consistently, so what she does is she's academic front, basically, for this broader movement, which she has endorsed. She's endorsed Posey Parker, who has said horrific things that I don't think would be appropriate.
No, but hang on, I asked you, what does
her.
Kathleen Stock, hang on, what has Kathleen Stock herself said or done to warrant this treatment?
Yeah. I don't know, yeah, I understand. I don't know if you've read her book, Piers. She consistently misgenders people. She talks about whether, like, trans ideology should exist, whether trans people should be part of the LGBTQ community. Now, what she talks about is part of a massive campaign against trans people, and she wasn't kicked out of Warwick University. She left because she was bummed that people didn't like what she had to say because it hurts real trans people.
Look, Riz,
can I just?
Yeah, I've got two other guests. Here's my point. You see, I have looked at what she said. She says many trans women are still males with male genitalia. Many are sexually attracted to females. They should not be in places where females undress or sleep in an unrestricted way. Self-ID threatens a secure understanding of the concept of lesbian, and so on. She stands up for the sanctity of biological sex, and I'm struggling to find out what is so offensive about all this. It seems to me what's more offensive are young students who think that biological sex is a movable feast that can be denied and that the science is to be ignored and that anyone can put their hand up and say they're anything they like and they have to be respected. That I find more offensive than anything Kathleen Stock has said.
So that's absolutely fine if you find that offensive, Piers. The reality is, as much as she exercises her right to free speech, so do we. The students have consistently said, as I've mentioned before, that they don't welcome her here. And specifically, the tweet that you quoted
yeah, but that's
was me
not honouring
responding to
free
Kathleen
speech, is
Stock
it,
saying,
Riz? That's the opposite of free speech.
Yes,
what
it
you're
is.
doing is
free
deplatforming
speech
people
is
whose
about-
opinions you don't agree with. My argument is, I agree with a lot of what she says. I don't get it. What you're doing is you're basically,
That's
you're
fine.
basically
You're allowed to
behaving as a
agree.
group. You're behaving like a bunch of young fascists. You want people, only people, who toe the line to your worldview. And her worldview, by the way,
There's
is
a bit
shared
of a
by
delay.
the
Could you
vast
just let me know
majority
when I
of
can come
people.
back to those points?
All right, well, let me come to the other
Can I
panelists
respond
first.
now?
Let me come to the other panelists.
Okay.
Konstantin, this strikes me as right to the heart of the malaise at our academia, worldwide, actually. This worldview, I don't like this person's views, even though they're not that controversial at all. In fact, most people would agree with them. And yet they have to be deplatformed, abused, branded bigots, blah, blah, blah. This right here is the heart of this problem.
And let me answer the question that Riz didn't answer when you asked her what Kathleen has done that is so wrong is she's blasphemed against this new religion that says trans women are women. And as you say, the vast majority of the public don't agree with that. And therefore, students have to then become little fascists, like you said, and shut this down because they can't tolerate hearing an opinion that they don't like. And so to the extent that they have power, they're going to use it to bully people into not speaking in places that they can. I'm grateful that the government pushed through the bill, which now means universities have to ensure that free speech is respected there. It's very, very important that these people don't win because you can see their smug faces as they do this.
Oh, yeah.
And they enjoy the power and they enjoy exercising over people. And by the way, I've interviewed Kathleen on my show, Trigonometry. She's one of the sweetest, kindest, most generous, gentle people that you will meet. If she's hateful, then we're all hateful.
Well, this is the point, isn't it? Dr. Briggs, you've come here from Oxford University. What is going on there? Because a lot of the academic people there now seem to be rising up against this and supporting the concept of free speech, but that's causing a rift now in the university. What's really going on?
Well, I think it's good that things have come to a head and we finally can debate about whether we could listen to the very mild, as Konstantin said, the very mild views of Kathleen Stock, which really represents the majority of British people. Now, maybe not the majority of students, but even the minority of students have a right to hear, if they if they want to hear Kathleen Stock's views. And even people who are opposed to her, like Riz, should go along and listen and just decide why exactly what they disagree with.
What I don't understand is why
argument.
This whole concept. When I've taken part in the Oxford Union, which I've done, and the Cambridge Union and others, I've always enjoyed it, but I've always gone there believing it was my job to try and make people come around to my way of thinking, which was an old debate. In fact, I was back at my old prep school for the first time in 50-odd years the other day, at the weekend, and I passed this old White House where the headmaster's wife used to hold debating society when I was about 7 or 8. And that we were encouraged at that age, challenge other views, listen to other views, formulate your own opinion and be unafraid to change it if you hear things which change your mind. This is all just gone out the window.
So the problem is if you have a certain identity or if you have a certain view, then you can say, I'm so vulnerable, I can't listen to any opposing views that they, not only can I not listen, but even the very existence of those other views being articulated somewhere, within a 5-mile radius.
Has Kathleen Stock said anything that you see which would justify this kind of treatment?
No, of course not. No.
Piers, just to the point you made about when you go and when I went to the Oxford Union about trying to persuade people, think about what would be the circumstances in which you wouldn't want to persuade people and you would want to shut down people who disagree with you. The only circumstance in which you might be tempted to do that is if you know your arguments are rubbish.
Yeah.
And that is why these people are doing it.
Or if you're living in Russia, China or North Korea,
right,
where you would then call the secret police and they would come and remove the person with the offensive opinion, which was one that the government didn't agree with or whatever, and they would be taken off to some detention centre in Siberia. I mean, this is where we're heading. This is what they don't get, these students, is that once you accept that you're allowed to do this to people who have perfectly mainstream opinions, this is a slippery slope to totalitarianism, right?
Quite.
All right, Riz,
Can I respond to that?
You can respond to that. You're a totalitarian barbarian.
So you've talked about fascism as a far-right ideology about suppressing stuff. to be clear, this has been a consistent democratic decision in student institutions,
on that point,
right? Students have made this together.
On that point, do you object to being called right-wing?
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
I only mention that because when we invited the president of Oxford University LGBTQ plus society to come on the programme, he replied, I think it's a he, this is Adi Harandiman. Do you know that person?
Yeah, and I'd actually like to talk about that. That person did not come on your show because they have been subject to this consistent program of hate that I've been talking about.
Well,
let me just finish this point.
Well, hang on, I'm going to finish my point.
Well, it was, because I know this person personally.
That wasn't the reason given by this person who replied, hiya, to my producer, nice to meet you, we're reluctant to work with right-wing media. So, I'm not right-wing. I've never been right-wing. You're not right-wing. You object to being called right-wing. I object to being called right-wing. So we found a point of consensus.
So the reason that other people don't want to take up interviews like this or be on platforms like this is because of the hate campaign
because they don't like debating, Riz.
By fans of Kathleen
At least
Stock.
you have the gumption to come on.
Can I just respond to some of those points, Piers?
Well, look, here's my point. I was paying you a compliment. You do at least come on and debate with me, right?
Yeah.
But here's my problem with the rest of your colleagues.
They don't
want to debate it because they don't want to hear someone saying something they don't like.
I'd really love to respond to that point. So you mentioned that the tweet that I said in response to Kathleen. Now, what you didn't mention is that Kathleen was responding to a tweet by Addy, who you previously mentioned, publishing a death threat that they received by one of her fans. That's why people don't want to be on platforms like this. Now, with regards to a debate, first of all, I don't believe that trans lives should be a debate, but that's not in question here anyway, because the Oxford Union wasn't trying to platform a debate. They weren't trying to put on a debate. There weren't equal sides on it.
You can't just keep talking. We've had this conversation before. No one's debating trans lives. No one's debating trans rights to fairness and equality. I've certainly never. I've only ever supported trans rights to fairness and equality. But if you're going to stand there now on television and say that you believe what's happening in women's sport, for example, is anything but grotesquely unfair and unequal, then say so, if you genuinely believe it.
I think what's grotesquely unfair and unequal is the violence and hatred that trans people are consistently facing in the media, in person, in public, and online as a result of your fans, Kathleen Stock.
Wasn't my question. Is it fair that trans athletes are now demolishing women born with female biological bodies at women's sport? Is that fair, yes or no?
This is a really boring point, but I'm happy to answer it.
Just give me a simple yes or no.
That's not happening,
you think
trans
people
should be absolutely allowed to...
OK, it's not happening. You're obviously not reading the papers, you're not watching TV, you are totally oblivious to the reality of what's happening. But Riz,
my bad, didn't realise.
OK, it's OK, no problem. Ignorance is bliss, right? Good to see you. Thank you very much. I mean, again, Konstantin, it's the mindset. It wouldn't even consider the possibility that what's happening in sport and women's sport is horrible because she has no idea, has no interest. Only interested in the impact on trans people.
It's a religion, Piers. I've said this to you before, I'll say it again. It's a religious worldview whereby your beliefs do not require evidence. They're based on a faith, right? And that's how these people think. So the reason I mentioned the Kathleen Stock, what she's doing, as all of us are doing, is violent.
Whereas she thinks she's entitled to call this woman, Kathleen Stock, a bigot and so on and so on. I want to just quickly ask you about something else, because you're a comedian. John Cleese has warned that his Life of Brian stage show, based on the movie, shouldn't include a scene about a man wanting to be a woman and having a baby, which is ironic given the subject matter we've been discussing. It was funny at the time. It's kind of ironic now. But even John Cleese feels compelled to perhaps remove that because it may offend people, the concept of a joke about men having babies. But we've reached a point where, there will be protests about that because it's offensive.
Isn't it amazing? Because it looks like they're literally quoting from 2023 conversations in a satirical piece of satire becoming real life. And what it shows you, I think, most of all, how far we've come in this delusion.
I totally agree, because actually, Dr. Briggs, I mean, that was deemed to be humour at the time because it was so ludicrous that nobody ever assumed that would actually be a reality. But we've reached that point where satire's coming true.
Yes, yes, indeed. But I think, though, just to take up the point about the religion, I mean, the reason why there's so much hate towards Kathleen Stock is because she's a lesbian, because she's an apostate. So she's part of the LGBT community, but she's articulating a different view, and so therefore she's much more threatening than most people would be.
I saw a comedian called Freddie Quinn on morning TV, Good Morning Britain today, and he made the point, there's a scene from that movie with a guy with a lisp. Does that have to go? Because it's offensive to people with speech impediments. There's a scene with a character called Incontinentia buttocks. Is that offensive to people with IBS? There's a scene with people with big noses. Is that offensive to people with big noses? There's one about blessing the cheesemakers. Do we have to reach out to a National Association of Dairy Farmers to see if they're upset by it? And the truth is, actually, probably yes, because somebody somewhere will be already getting the pitchforks out, ready to blow their gasket about all these scenes being offensive, until eventually there is no Live O'Brien.
And that's why I think all of us have to just ignore these people being silly, which is what they're doing, and say, you're allowed to be offended. Nothing happens when you get offended. Nothing changes. The world does not start revolving
That's what
around
Ricky
you.
Gervais always says.
Right.
Yeah, he has a right to say what he says. You have a right to be offended. Your right to be offended doesn't overcome his own right to crack jokes. Thank you both very much indeed. I appreciate it.